This is SoCalQuest on Full Tilt Poker. Today I'm going to be making a 4-table video playing 6 max 50 no limit hold'em. Here I open up Queen Jack suited from the hijack, and I'm going to be raising here 4x, and from the last two positions, the cutoff and button, to 3x. The reason being is it discourages players to call from the cutoff and button, and I'll be able to play in position against the blinds a lot more often. Also, when I raise 3x from the cutoff and button, my range is going to be a lot wider, so it gives me a cheaper price on my steals. So I get called by the small blind Bill Frist, and this board, a 7-9-8 with a flush draw, is not a great board to continuation bet. He's going to peel here with a lot of open-ended straight draws, any 10 or any 6, obviously. He's going to have a lot of pair plus straight draws, like an 8-10, 9-10, 7-6 type hands. And I just don't expect him to fold here very often. And I will check back a slightly stronger hand with more showdown value, such as ace high and maybe some king highs. Queen jack, I will probably be c-betting here, because it won't show down very well. Plus, it's always nice to have a gut shot to the nuts. Jack 4 suited is about my cutoff on what I open in this position. Unless the players behind me are very loose or very aggressive, I'm going to be opening up a very wide range, even as bad as Jack 4 suited. A lot of other hands like 6-7 offsuit as well. This is a pretty standard open with ace-2 suited against two unknowns. Well, one tight small blind and an unknown in the big blind. It's important to note here his stack size. If a player does not have the minimum or the maximum, they're typically going to be a weaker player in general. This doesn't hold true all the time, but it's a trend worth noting. When he donks into me for the minimum 50 cents into a $3.10 pot, it's a very weak line from weak players. I will raise here with nearly 100% of my range. They will be folding very, very often here. I don't understand what they're thinking for the most part. I just know that when they do that, they don't like to be raised and they will be folding. Here with king 6 diamonds, if it folds around to me, in the small blind, if I decide to open and king 6 suited definitely is a hand I will be opening, I'll be raising 4x rather than 3x. I see a lot of regulars opening 3x. I definitely like to raise 4x. It causes them to put more of their stack in when they do want to re-raise from that spot, and it discourages them from calling and playing a pot in position. Here I opened 10 queen suited from the cutoff and get called by a 1915 button, and I make a standard continuation bet, and he makes a little bit more than a min raise here. I don't really have a great grasp on his range. I haven't played many hands with him, but he's giving me a great price to draw here, so I'm definitely going to call. I don't like to raise because if he gets it all in with me, my equity is never going to be good there. Here, when the queen hits, I expect him here to, if he raised on the flop with the flush draw, to bet the turn with his flush, to build the pot and try to get stacks in by the river. We still have 100 big blinds left, or 80, 84 big blinds left to get in. So I'm pretty sure he's taking a pot control line here with either a jack or 9, or maybe something like 10-10 or 8-8. So at this point, I definitely want to bet a hand. I definitely want to bet an amount that I think he's going to call, and I don't want to bet too big because my hand is going to be good here very often, but his hand is definitely not top pair or better. So So I go ahead and bet about half pot, giving him 3-to-1 odds on his money. And unfortunately he folds. I'm going to be folding a lot from the blinds. I typically like to play about a 3-better fold game from the blinds. It makes hand reading a lot easier, allows you to read their ranges a lot easier when they're a lot tighter. So, and I don't like to play with them in position having the initiative. Here I will be calling though with 6-6. The first position opened, and my hand plays a lot better for set value in this spot. I'm going to go ahead and pause. If he was opening from the button, I would definitely 3-bet 6-6 because it doesn't play well when his range is really wide, which it would be from the button. Because when I do make my set, he won't be paying off nearly enough because his range is just not strong enough to get all the money in. When a player opens from first position, they have a much tighter range. Typically, they play half the amount of hands that from first position than they do in the button. So it's a lot more acceptable for me to call for set value for a standard raise when they are in first position. And I'm typically just going to check fold that type of flop. Here with ace-king suited, the button opens. Like I said, I'm going to be 3-betting here with nearly all my range against a late position open. And notice the bet size. I did pot plus 1 big blind. This discourages him from calling, 1, where he has the positional advantage, and 2, it decreases his implied odds the more money I get in position or out of position. And when he 4-bets me, I don't know how often he's going to be doing this. I've only seen him do it with 2 hands, but this is an amount that a lot of regulars will be 4-betting to. It doesn't really commit them to the hand, and it allows them to fold to some pushes. So, I mean, I'm definitely not 3-betting ace-king in this position, intending to fold it, so I'm pretty much shoving here 100% of the time. And I would never be flatting a 4-bet and playing a pot out of position, even if I was in position. It's a shove or fold spot. He tanks and he has ace-king. It's a pretty standard hand from both of us. When a player limps here, Funk Dog on the top left table, I'm going to be isolating him so wide here. It's going to be really profitable. This type of player typically calls, sometimes folds before the flop. Let me pause it here. And they like to give up when they miss. This board, 7-3-2, I'm continuation betting 100% of the time if he checks to me here. But I have to realize what percentage of the time he's going to be calling me with. And on this board, he's going to have 2 overs a lot, whether it be 8-9, 10-king, ace-10, any of those type hands. And I imagine he's going to be peeling them a lot on the flop. So if I do bet here and he calls, I intend to bet the turn, most turn cards, 100% of the time, because I expect he'll be peeling 1 time on the flop and then giving up on the turn if he doesn't make his hand. So he calls, and this card is not a card I'm going to be barreling. I would have barreled any card 8 and above, really. But this card really doesn't change anything, and I just don't think he's going to be folding often enough for my hand to be, or for the bet to be profitable. So I'm pretty much giving up on that turn. I probably would have given up on that turn and any time the board paired 7-3 or 2, and I'm just gonna look him up here. So that gives us an indication of how weak this player is. He limped from the cutoff with king 2 suited and called a raise out of position and called a continuation bet on the flop. So we know he's going to be a calling station, so we're going to look not to bluff him so much in the future. Jack 8 suited and king queen from the cutoff are both opens for me. King Jack also an open from the hijack. I have a really wide opening range for most positions. When I get 3-bet here by VR4 Rider, this is pretty much a fold all the time. Even though he 3-bets 6%, which is about average or slightly high, this hand will not play very well out of position. This table appears to be pretty loose and aggressive here at the bottom left, Fern. This player is playing 38-31, small sample. This one 24-19. Drunk Mashimaro playing 25-19. So with deep stacks and whatnot, I'm only playing 100 big blinds deep, but these Farmer Tuck and S. Miska both appear to be kind of weak, but the two aggressive players on my left, I would probably leave this table in most situations. It's typically better to have loose bad players on your left and the aggressive players on your right. In the above hand, I have king 8 offsuit, and he Funk Dog, the player that limped king 2 suited earlier, completed the small blind, which is typically weakness. I'll be raising there with 100% of my range from the big blind, and he limp re-raised me, and I imagine his range is slightly wide there, considering he saw me raise him pre-flop with Jack Queens, and then continuation bet on the flop with nothing. So, but I don't really want to get into a huge war with him with a hand as weak as king 8 offsuit. Okay, here Bill Frist opens from first position with, or I don't know what he has, but he is 15-12, so he only raises 12% of his hands, and he's in first position, so I suspect he's raising a very, very tight range here. Ace-Jack suited is a little bit too good of a hand to fold here, and against this particular player is a little bit, or really not a good hand to 3-bet. It plays terribly in 3-bet pots, so I'm probably going to peel here and reevaluate on the flop. Okay, the board comes queen 7-9, and I noticed that he has a very high flop continuation bet of 83%, which he should because he has a tight range. But I don't intend to fold in this particular flop. I have a backdoor straight draw, the ace might be an out, backdoor flush draw, and I intend to call here on the flop and have him turn his hand face up on the turn. I'm going to be floating him here. If he checks the turn, a large percentage of the time it's going to be ace-king, 10-10, jacks, which he probably will not be able to call a turn bet on. If he bets again, I assume his range is going to be very strong, and it'll be a pretty easy fold for me on the turn. So I go ahead and peel in. I pick up a backdoor flush draw here, and I still intend to bet if he checks, and get him to fold all better hands like 10-10, Ace-King, 8-8, Jacks. And I probably will be folding if he did bet in this spot. I don't think I'd have the implied odds to hit. I'm only hitting this my flush about 20% of the time. So if he bet near pot there, I would probably give up on the turn. Considering he did check, I'm going to bet and hopefully take it down. It's really a tough spot there from his perspective. If he did have a hand like 10-10, even if he knew I was floating, it's just tough to call with money behind and out of position and having to reevaluate on the river when he has to check again. On this board here of King 10 Queen, in limp pots, I typically like to fire at them at least once if everyone's showing weakness, but this board texture is just pretty terrible, and it's going to give him a lot of straight draws and pairs. So once he bets once he checks the flop, I'm pretty much going to fire because my hand has no showdown value there. If I had ace high, I'd be more inclined to check it down and win a decent percentage of the time, but 9 high is pretty much not going to be winning there very often. It gets him to fold out some of his ace highs if he has a hand like 3-3 or 2-2 that he limped in with, or any small pair. Again, I'm going to be opening a lot of junky suited hands here until people give me a reason not to. On this flop, I flop very, very well. I have a flush draw, a gut shot, 2 overs, and it's a good board because when he does have ace high and makes the wheel, the ace to 5 straight, I'm going to have the higher straight, and he's probably going to be paying off. So I'm going to c-bet. It's also a good board because a lot of the ace high hands he called with pre-flop, let's say he had ace 10 or ace jack, is likely going to be check raising this board very often. One, because it didn't hit me very much, and 2, it gives him 2 overs and a gut shot straight draw on this particular board. And the good thing about that is I expect him to call a lot and then give up on the turn, or I expect him to raise me and be forced to fold to a 3-bet on the flop. And I have great equity against almost anything if we do get it in. So I'm going to go ahead and 3-bet here. He's an aggressive player as well. His aggression factor is 3.3 after 2,000 hands, meaning he's not calling very often. So I do expect him to have maybe small overpairs or ace high hands here a lot. I get 3-bet here in the small blind, and since I typically open so wide, I haven't been here. This is going to be near the top of my range, and you never want to be folding hands near the top of your range, so I'm going to go ahead and call and reevaluate on the flop. Again, like Bill Frist from before, he has a very high flop continuation bet, and this is a great board for him to continuation bet in a 3-bet pot. So I expect him to be betting all of his hands here, which include pairs less than queens. So I don't intend to give up, and I have a gut shot to the nuts as well. Here, same plan as before. If he does check, I intend to bet. He's going to be checking a lot of his air and a lot of his queen X. in jacks, tens, nines, eights, those type of hands, which he will be folding a very large percentage on the turn. If he bets, I'm just going to fold. I don't intend him to double barrel me out of position with a pure bluff very often. Note the bet sizing here as well. A lot of players, when they do float, want to bet about 21 or 22 here, which I think is excessive. When you bet slightly over half pot or a little bit under 2/3, it accomplishes the same thing. It puts their stack at risk, and it gives you less, or it punishes you less when he does check raise or call you on the turn. So I think that particular bet sizing, maybe a little bit smaller, is ideal in that spot, where he has a hand he can't continue with, but when he does, it's just going to cost you money. And that is something I do like to do a lot in these games. At 25 at NL50 NL, a lot of players know to bet and then c-bet almost 100% of their range on a lot of flops. So if I have position on them, I'm going to go ahead and float them a lot, because they're not going to be able to fire that double barrel. Very rarely at 25 NL and 50 NL will you find a player that is just putting tons of pressure on you in the turn. So if they are going to be turning their hands face up on the turn, it's very profitable to call with those type hands with gut shots and whatnot. So far I'm playing 24-20 on the top left table, 18-18, 22-17, 27-27, which is not at all out of line. It's not what I play. I typically play about 24-20. Here, a tight player opens in second position. He's playing 18-50 and gets called by the very loose Funk Dog. We saw him earlier play with King Deuce of diamonds in a raised pot, and then calling with bottom pair on the flop. So I'm going to put a lot of pressure here on Homer by squeezing. This puts a lot of pressure because not only one, I have a very strong hand, but he still has a player left to act behind him that could do whatever this guy is going to do. So he's going to be folding here a lot with his weaker hands, which really allows me to peg his range as very strong when he calls. So I go ahead and squeeze. Again, it's going to be like 1 to 2 big blinds slightly larger than pot. This discourages this player in position from calling and getting 2-1 immediate odds on his money. And he does fold. Funk Dog, we've already seen him call really loose, so I didn't expect him to fold there. So my goal was to isolate the tag, or I mean, have the tag fold and isolate the weak loose player in position with a very strong hand and built in a built pot. Like I mentioned earlier, on these type boards that are really dry, I'm going to be betting slightly more than half pot in these big pots. I can still get the money in by the river since we did 3-bet pre-flop, and the times he does check raise me, I save a few big blinds, and those really add up over thousands of hands. It will really show in your win rate when you're able to manipulate bet sizing and pot sizes that are advantageous to you. Here I had King 5 auto checked off, but that's a hand I'll open against 2 tight blinds. 1915, 1917, it was really just a mistake of my own here. Here again, I try to isolate Funk Dog and a relatively loose player. Well, I mean, the hand sample is small. 3 bets. This is a great bet here. One I like to make too against players that are going to be isolating the weak players a lot with any part of his range. because my range is so wide here, and everyone knows it because they've seen me isolate a ton here, that they can go ahead and 3-bet, and I'll have to fold a large percentage of the time. It's going to be very profitable to do that against tags and regulars that are trying to isolate the fish. I opened Queen 9 suited from the cutoff, and Bill Frist again calls from the small blind. It's a pretty standard continuation bet for me on a 9 high board monotone. I do intend to fold to a lot of his check raises here. I'm not doing very well. People just don't bluff raise these boards very often without equity. So I mean, even if he has like ace jack with a diamond, or if he has 2 pair sets, I'm just not going to be doing very well against his range, and I'm never going to know whether or not he has 2 pair, whether he has a set, or if my hand is good if a diamond comes. So rather than play the guessing game, I'm just going to give up a relatively strong hand early before I have to make big money decisions later. And that's an important thing to do when playing in these games, is to limit the tough decisions you have to make. So by making a fold in that spot, it's going to save me from having to make a big turn decision in a really big pot. Okay, so let me go back here for a second. He 3-bet me in this hand from the small blind. This player here with 10-10, and earlier we saw him 3-betting with Queen Jack. These are hands that are not great to 3-bet at 100% frequency. Queen Jack especially, because anytime you're called, you're just not doing well in a 3-bet pot. So in this, against Tahoe 29, I'm going to be tightening up my range a little bit since he has position on me, and I'm going to go ahead and play a much tighter range in the 3-bet pots, because he's going to be in a lot of trouble if he's 3-betting with hands like Queen Jack. Even 10-10. 10-10 is okay, but I don't 3-bet that hand with 100% frequency. I'd prefer to 3-bet from out of position with hands that are very strong, queens plus, is queen suited plus, or that are relatively weak, like suited connectors or small pairs. It leaves me... Wait, let me talk about this hand. I'll get back to that in a second. Okay, so I opened, and this player over the 11 hands has been very aggressive. He's 3-bet us once already, and he's 3-bet 33% of the hands he's been in. We're playing 100 big blinds effective. I make a standard open from Queen Jack, and since he's already 3-bet us, I'm sure he knows our range from this position is pretty wide, and he goes ahead and 3-bets us. I don't want him to run over us for the entire match, and I think this is a good spot here to 4-bet. Queen Jack holds, it's a weak hand, it's purely for bluff value. If he shoves, I'm going to be folding all the time here. But Queen Jack holds blockers to queens, jacks, ace queen, king queen. So I mean, it's not a great hand. It is not the best hand to do it with. I'd almost rather be 4-betting with like a hand like ace 5 suited. It holds more blockers to ace king, aces, the hands that he would be 3-betting for value. So I go ahead and 4-bet here. And when I 4-bet, I'm going to be 4-betting small. I'm only 4-betting 27% of our effective stacks. This gives me room to fold to his shove and never commits me to the hand. A lot of players, when they do 4-bet, will 4-bet to 3x his raise, so maybe like $16 there, and they have to call with 100% of the range, or mathematically they have to. Often they fold anyway, but by doing that, it puts a lot of pressure on him. And he didn't go ahead and shove or fold, which is what the bet is intended to do. And since he's very loose, I imagine he's peeling there because he thinks he's getting great odds in position, which is just not a great play in general. So I flop top pair and don't intend to fold this at any point. But rather than bet like $18, $19, or $20 like many players will do here, I'm going to bet a lot smaller to give him room This is induce a bluff for him to go over the top. Since I don't intend on folding as it is, this gives him room to bet 37 total and hopefully get me to fold some hands. If I bet 21, he's almost never bluffing there, and my bet has a lot less value. Here I have auto-checked fold for the Jack-8, mainly because I'm not going to be opening these marginal hands against a player that's playing 23-21 and is 3-betting 7% of the time. With a hand like Jack-8, I'd rather open that against a tight player that's going to be folding often, one that's not going to be 3-betting me or calling me and forcing me to play out of position. Here I open Jack Queen suited. If Dude Star were to 3-bet me, I'd definitely fold this out of position. If I were 3-bet by one of the blinds, this is a hand that plays well in position, and I would be more inclined to call them in that spot. The reason being is I'm not going to be able to float Dude Star's continuation bet profitably out of position. If he bets the flop, I'm not going to be able to call and then check the turn again. He has all the informational advantage. But I will have the floating potential against the blinds if they were to 3-bet me from those spots, as you saw earlier in the video. So far I've been playing pretty standard. I haven't been getting that out of line, except for maybe the top left where the loose player, he's left now, was playing back at me a little bit. But I've been opening fairly light, 21% of my hands, 24, 14, 21 from late position, and people have 3-bet me a little bit, but they're not getting really fed up with me, so I'm going to continue opening light. If people were started 3-betting me a lot against my late position opens, I would go ahead and at that point adjust and open raise a lot tighter range. So if you ever are playing a kind of loose or very aggressive game and people are playing back at you, go ahead and switch it up and do the opposite of what they've seen you do, and they'll be thrown off and have your hand ranges messed up. The reason I didn't buy in 200 big blinds into this table is I don't like to play 200 big blinds deep unless there's a fish at the table that's playing 200 big blinds deep. So I go ahead and just buy in for 100 big blinds deep and buy in for 200 if a weak player at the table is also deep. Additionally, Tahoe 29, 3-bets wide, will put a lot of pressure on me, and he has position on me. So I'm just not gonna play in deep spots against him very often, because the money in poker flows to the left, and I'm not going to let the big money pots go to him when he's in position. I open up jacks here, and I bet slightly larger than what I would. Here I bet $3.2 into $4.05, which is about 75% a pot. It's a dry board, and I don't expect him to hit it very often, but I expect my hand to be best fairly often. And if I want to build a pot where a lot of the money is going to get in by the river, I will bet slightly larger on the flop. If I had air there, let's say I had like an ace high or 8 high or something, I would go ahead and bet maybe like 60% of the pot, and that's going to add up in the long term when you're betting slightly larger with your made hands, and then less with your bluffs. To a size that's not totally obvious to them, they're not going to know if you're betting 60% or as a bluff and 75% for value. Players at these stakes, and most stakes in general, are just not very observant, so they're not going to notice the difference between 60% and 75%. All right, thanks, Bill. This is SoCalQuest. I think that's pretty much the end of the video. Thanks.